The barracks went quiet when she walked in, carrying her rucksack across the floor. The new recruits noticed something inked across her shoulder blade, peeking from under her shirt. Snickers spread. "What's that on her back? Some fake Navy tattoo?" they joked. But the laughter ended the moment the SEAL commander stepped forward, his face turning from stern to pale recognition. The barracks smelled of boot polish and fresh paint, the air filled with the restless energy of recruits who believed they were the toughest of the tough. It was a room full of swagger. Young men trading stories, boasting about push-up counts, joking about who would quit first in the next round of training. Then the door opened. She stepped inside quietly, duffel slung over one shoulder, her uniform pressed with an almost surgical precision. She didn't strut, didn't raise her chin the way others did when they wanted to be noticed. She just walked in, calm and steady, and took a bunk near the corner of the room. At first, no one paid her much attention. New arrivals came and went all the time, but when she bent forward to slide her bag under the bed, the edge of her shirt shifted. Ink. The top curve of a tattoo stretched across her shoulder blade, visible for only a second. It was a trident, stylized, sharp, unmistakably military in its design. A few recruits noticed. One smirked. "Hey, check it out. She's got herself a Navy SEAL tat." Another chuckled. "What, from a parlor in San Diego? Probably got it on spring break." The laughter spread like sparks catching dry brush. Fake ink. Bet she's never even held a real rifle. Some wannabe marking herself with things she didn't earn. Yeah, maybe she's trying to impress the commander. Thinks a tattoo makes her special. She ignored it. Sitting on the edge of her bunk, she unlaced her boots, movements precise, steady. Not once did she rise to their bait, but her silence only encouraged them. "Hey," one soldier said louder, pointing. "What's that on your back? You think you're one of us?" Newsflash. No woman's ever worn the trident. The others laughed again, the sound bouncing off the walls. Her eyes flicked up for the briefest moment. Calm. Controlled. She didn't bother correcting them. She didn't owe them words, and that infuriated them more. The mocking grew harsher. They made jokes about dress-up soldiers and tattoo shop warriors. Each jab was meant to draw her into an argument, to prove she was fragile, that she didn't belong. But she never answered. Instead, she reached into her duffel, pulled out a small, well-worn notebook, and opened it on her lap. The barracks roared with derision, but she read silently, letting the storm pass over her like waves breaking on stone. The men didn't realize it yet, but their laughter was about to backfire. They weren't mocking a poser. They weren't mocking a wannabe. They were mocking someone who had bled, suffered, and fought in places their imaginations could barely reach. And the tattoo they sneered at wasn't for decoration. It was a seal of fire, earned through missions they'd never even hear about, on battlefields that would never make the news. But they wouldn't learn that from her lips. They would learn it the hard way, when the SEAL commander walked through that door. The tension in the barracks didn't ease with time. If anything, it thickened. The recruits, still riding the false high of their own egos, circled around her like sharks testing the waters. She sat quietly on her bunk, notebook open on her lap, her pen scratching across the page. Calm, focused, but silence, to them, looked like weakness. "Come on," one soldier said, swaggering closer. "You walk in here with a fake trident on your back and expect nobody to say anything?" Another leaned in, smirking. "You can't just ink yourself up with SEAL symbols. That's stolen valor." The others nodded, muttering their agreement. They thought they had her cornered. Still, she didn't rise to the bait. She closed the notebook, set it gently on the bunk, and stood up slowly. Her eyes swept the group. No anger, no fear, just calm. "Prove it," one of them said suddenly, his grin widening. "If you're the real deal, prove it." The room buzzed. They loved this idea. Some began suggesting push-up challenges. Others called for pull-up contests or long runs in the yard. The kind of crude physical tests that rookies thought measured greatness. One soldier sneered. "Bet she can't even get through the obstacle course without collapsing." Another added, "Yeah, let's see if that tattoo comes with any muscle behind it." The mockery was no longer just words. It was becoming a mob, but she didn't flinch. She didn't even scowl. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as though considering whether their taunts were worth her energy. Then she gave the smallest shake of her head. "No," she said simply. The single word landed heavier than a paragraph. The recruits blinked in surprise. "No? What do you mean, no? You scared? Knew it. Total fake." Their voices rose again, feeding off each other. But beneath the noise, a subtle unease began to stir. The way she refused to play their game, refused to let them dictate the rules, felt different. It wasn't weakness. It was control. The kind of control that only came from someone who had already been tested far beyond Barracks games. One soldier, older than the rest, frowned. He wasn't laughing anymore. He studied her posture, her eyes, the way she held herself. There was no slouch, no nervous shifting. Her stance was relaxed, but her presence filled the space with quiet gravity. He opened his mouth to say something, but the barracks door slammed open before he could. Every head turned. The SEAL commander stepped inside. His uniform was pressed, his ribbons heavy with service. His presence shifted the room instantly. Backs straightened, mouths shut. The commander's eyes scanned the room, sharp and unreadable. "What's the noise in here?" he barked. Silence. No one dared answer. Then one of the recruits, too bold for his own good, jabbed a finger toward her. "Sir, this recruit's walking around with a fake SEAL tattoo on her back. We were just, calling her out." The commander's gaze snapped to her. His face was stone, his eyes narrowing as though cutting through every layer of her being. She didn't move. Didn't explain, didn't defend herself. She simply stood tall, silent under his stare. The commander took a step closer. Then his voice dropped. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. "Show me." The room seemed to shrink as the commander's words echoed. "Show me." The recruits shifted nervously. They had wanted a spectacle, but not like this. Not with him watching. His presence was like a storm cloud rolling in, heavy, inevitable, and impossible to ignore. She didn't argue. She didn't hesitate. With steady movements, she reached for the zipper of her training hoodie and pulled it down. The fabric slid away, revealing the curve of her shoulder and the dark ink etched across her back. The recruits leaned forward, eager to see the so-called fake. Their smirks returned, ready to laugh again, until the commander stepped closer. His boots echoed against the floor with each step. He stopped just behind her, staring at the ink. The silence in the barracks grew suffocating. The tattoo wasn't the kind of art you saw in civilian parlors. It wasn't flashy or exaggerated. It was clean, sharp, deliberate. The unmistakable SEAL trident, but not quite the version most people had seen on posters or plaques. This one carried subtle marks woven into the design, details so precise that only a handful of men alive would know what they meant. The commander froze. His jaw clenched. His eyes widened, just slightly. Behind him, the recruits began whispering again. "Looks fake, right? Yeah, just a copy off Google. Bet she got it overseas for $20. The commander's hand shot up, sharp as a blade, silencing them instantly. He bent closer, his shadow stretching across her back. His fingertips hovered near the tattoo, not touching, but tracing the air above it as though memorizing every line. The room waited for his verdict. Then finally, he straightened. His face was different now, no longer stone, but something harder. Something heavier. He turned to the recruits, his eyes blazing. "Do you idiots even know what you're looking at?" He barked. The soldiers froze. None dared answer. "That," he said, stabbing a finger toward the tattoo, "is not fake. That is not decoration. That is a mark reserved for an operator who completed a mission you couldn't even comprehend. Classified. Dangerous. A mission most men don't survive." Mouths fell open. The recruits looked at one another, stunned. The commander stepped back to her, his voice lowering, almost reverent now. "I haven't seen one of these in years," he muttered, "and I never thought I'd see it on someone standing here today." The silence was absolute. She zipped her hoodie back up, calm as ever, as though none of this mattered to her. She didn't seek validation. She didn't need their approval. Her silence said more than their noise ever could. The commander turned slowly, scanning the room again. His stare was fire, burning through each of them. "You mocked her?" he growled. "You dared laugh at what she's carried? At what she's earned? Every single one of you should be ashamed." The recruits' faces burned red. The weight of their mistake sank in deeper with every second. The commander's eyes returned to her. For a brief moment, the steel in his gaze softened. He gave the faintest nod, a gesture of respect no one in that room had ever seen him give. Without another word, he left the barracks, the door slamming shut behind him. The silence that followed was crushing. For the first time, the recruits weren't looking at her with laughter in their eyes. They were looking at her with something else. Something they had never expected to feel toward her respect. The recruits stood frozen in the barracks long after the commander's footsteps faded down the hallway. The silence was thick, every pair of eyes drawn to her, the woman they had mocked only minutes before. But she didn't meet their stares. She simply returned to her bunk, sat down, and reopened her notebook. Her pen began to move again, calm and steady as if nothing had happened. The others couldn't understand it. They whispered among themselves. What did he mean? Classified? Impossible missions? She's not even old enough for that. Could he have been bluffing? Their confusion deepened with each second of her silence. For soldiers who thrived on noise, on boasting, on measuring themselves against one another, her stillness was alien. Unsettling. Then the door opened again. The commander returned. But this time his expression wasn't anger. It was something else. Something heavier. He carried a folder in his hand, the edges worn, the cover stamped with restricted access. The recruit straightened, bracing for another lecture. Instead, he walked directly to her. "Stand," he ordered. She rose quietly, closing the notebook and setting it aside. She faced him without flinching. He handed her the folder. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She knew what was inside. The commander turned back to the room. His voice was calm now, but it carried the weight of steel. "You all want to know what that tattoo means? Fine, I'll tell you what I can." The recruits leaned forward, hanging on every word. "That ink is no decoration. It's not for show. It's a mark granted only to operators who completed Operation Silent Dagger. The name meant nothing to them." Blank stares filled the room. The commander smirked bitterly. "Of course you've never heard of it. You weren't supposed to. That op is buried under layers of clearance none of you will ever touch. Even in this folder," he held it up for emphasis, "half the pages are blacked out." A murmur rippled through the recruits. Their earlier bravado had evaporated, replaced with unease. He continued. "Silent Dagger was a mission considered impossible. Hostile territory, zero backup, no extraction guarantee. The kind of assignment that eats entire teams alive." His eyes flicked back to her. Except she made it back. The recruits stared at her in disbelief. The quiet figure they had dismissed, mocked, and laughed at. She had walked through a mission that destroyed men twice their size, twice their experience. The commander's voice dropped. "That tattoo is given only to those who carried out actions during Silent Dagger that changed the course of the mission. Actions that saved lives. Actions that, if we're being honest, should have been impossible." No one spoke. The commander looked around the room one final time. "So, the next time you feel like mocking someone, remember this. Respect is earned in ways you'll never read about in a manual. And some legends don't wear their medals on their chest. They carry them on their skin." He turned and left again, the door clicking shut behind him. This time, the silence wasn't confusion. It was reverence. The recruits looked at her differently now. Their arrogance was gone, replaced with something heavier, more complicated. They wanted to ask her questions, but they couldn't bring themselves to speak, because deep down, they knew, whatever story lay behind that tattoo, it was not one for their ears, and she wasn't about to share it. The barracks lights hummed faintly as the recruits sat frozen, their minds reeling from what the commander had said. But the weight of his words hadn't fully sunk in. Not until he returned again, this time slower, his face marked with something none of them had ever seen before: respect. He stopped in the center of the room, folding his hands behind his back. "You kids only see the uniform, the gear, the glory. You think this life is about muscles and bragging rights? His voice hardened. You know nothing. He paused, letting the silence sting. Since you're so curious about her tattoo. I'll tell you just enough to keep your arrogance in check. The recruits leaned in. Years ago, a team of SEALs was sent deep into hostile territory. The commander began. Their mission was to take down a high-value target who had already killed hundreds. Intel was bad, the terrain worse. Within hours, the op turned into a nightmare. Ambushes on all sides. The extraction zone compromised. Every path out closed. He paced slowly, his boots striking the floor like a metronome. Most would have called it a tomb, a one-way trip. But one operator, he pointed at her, standing still as stone, refused to let that be the end. The recruits glanced at her. But she didn't flinch. She was pinned on a ridge, armed with a Barrett 50. Enemy fighters swarmed the valley below, cutting off the SEALs. No air support, no reinforcements, just chaos. He stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing at the memory. She didn't panic. She didn't waste breath on fear. She adjusted her scope, studied the wind, and began firing. Not wild shots, not desperation. Calculated. Precise. His voice dropped lower, more intense. 2 kilometers, then 2,500 meters, then farther still, each shot clearing a path, each round punching holes through the enemy line. The SEALs moved only because she made it possible. Every inch they gained was bought with her bullets. The recruits' mouths were slightly open now. The commander leaned forward, voice gravelly. Her longest kill that day was 3,247 meters. Do you know what that means? Blank stares. He slammed a hand on a bunk frame, making them jump. It means she pulled the impossible. It means she steadied a weapon in the middle of a storm of fire and put a bullet exactly where it needed to be, further than most snipers even attempt in training. That shot didn't just break records. It saved the team. Without it, not one SEAL would have made it out alive. He straightened, his face etched with memory. And that, recruits, is why she carries that ink. Not because she wanted it. Not because she asked for it. Because those who survived demanded it. Because legends aren't written in parades or medals. They're written in the dirt, the blood, and the silence after the last shot. The room was so quiet, they could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The commander looked at her again. His jaw tightened, and his voice softened. You'll never understand what it cost her to earn it, and you don't deserve to know the rest. With that, he turned and walked out once more, leaving only the echo of his words. The recruits sat frozen. Their earlier mockery seemed absurd now, childish. They weren't looking at her as a peer anymore. They were looking at her as something else entirely. A living legend. The barracks felt different now. The air that had once been thick with laughter and mockery had grown heavy with silence. The recruits who had mocked her tattoo no longer dared to meet her eyes. Their smirks were gone, their bravado shattered. She sat quietly, back at her bunk, her notebook open again. The pen scratched softly against the paper, steady, deliberate. It was as though nothing had happened. No insults, no confrontation, no reveal. For her, this was routine. For them, it was a reckoning. One recruit finally broke the silence. His voice was quiet, hesitant. Why didn't you just say something? Her pen stopped. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice calm and even. Respect isn't claimed. It's earned. The words cut deeper than any rebuke. The recruit dropped his gaze, shame burning in his chest. Another soldier, braver than the rest, asked, Is it true? The mission? The shot? Her eyes lingered on him, steady, unblinking. She didn't confirm, didn't deny. She simply closed the notebook and slid it into her rucksack. The message was clear. Some stories weren't for sharing. Some truths lived only with those who carried them. The recruits sat in uneasy silence. For the first time, they weren't seeing her as the quiet one, or the girl with the fake tattoo. They were seeing her as something far greater, an operator who had endured the unendurable, done the impossible, and walked away without demanding applause. Hours later, when the lights dimmed and the barracks settled, the whispers began again. But these weren't mocking laughs anymore. They were fragments of awe, 3,200 meters. She saved an entire SEAL team. And we laughed at her. The shame burned hot in their throats, but beneath it was something new. Respect, admiration, even fear. The next morning, when training resumed, the shift was undeniable. No one challenged her. No one mocked her. When orders came down, they glanced her way, measuring their own reactions against hers. Her calmness steadied them. Her silence spoke louder than their shouting ever had. The commander noticed it too. During a drill, his gaze swept the recruits, then lingered on her. He didn't speak, didn't nod, but his expression carried the same weight as before. Recognition. Respect. By the end of the week, her presence had become a legend in the making. The recruits whispered her story to each other, each retelling tinged with awe. Some details blurred, exaggerated with each telling. But one truth never changed. They had mocked her once, and they would never make that mistake again. Late at night, when the barracks was quiet and the recruits drifted into uneasy sleep, she remained awake, writing in her notebook. Her hand moved steadily, recording memories only she would ever read. Missions, faces, the names of those who didn't make it back. Her tattoo was not a decoration. It was a burden, a memory etched in ink. The others saw it now with reverence, but to her, it was simply a reminder of the cost of survival. When she finally closed her notebook and lay down to rest, the silence was absolute. Around her, recruits dreamed of glory. She carried something heavier, the kind of weight only legends bore. And though they would never say it out loud, every soldier in that barracks knew the truth. They hadn't just trained beside a fellow recruit. They had trained beside a ghost of war, a living, breathing legend.